Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Isaac Straley, CISO at Getty. Isaac, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. Hackers are getting smarter. Is your security keeping up? Cyberlink sells industry-leading AI-powered cybersecurity solutions that detect threats in real time, so you know about an attack before the damage is done, not after. Learn more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Isaac, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Getty and your role there as CISO?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty interesting role. So when most people think of Getty, and it's also known as the J. Paul Getty Trust officially, they often think about the museums in LA. So there's two museums. There's one up in Brentwood, the Getty Center, which is what most people think of, and there's also the Getty Villa, which is out in the Pacific Palisades, or some people think it's Malibu. But there's actually a lot more. So you probably are thinking at this moment in time, does Getty really need a CISO? Like, is that something I asked too when I took the role? I've only been in it for about 2 months now, 2.5 months. It's my fourth time being a CISO, but this is probably the most interesting of the roles I've had to date. So I'm going to try to convince you in my little opening remarks here that Getty does in fact need a CISO, and not just like an IT security director or something like that. And so Getty actually has, especially from a sort of cybersecurity or digital perspective, there's really sort of four big programs, because it's not only this major tourist destination, which is becoming even more relevant as we talk about the World Cup and the Olympics in LA, right? It's in Los Angeles, but it's got a deep academic research library and scholarship program. It's got actually specialized scientific laboratory and research component, and it's also a global philanthropic grant maker. And so to me, it's actually a lot of interesting components. I want to break those down for you a little bit, because I don't know if that means anything, especially as we talk about sort of how this is relevant in like a business context. So I encourage you to think about those four areas as sort of four lines of business. The museum itself, which hosts, that's like 1.5 million visitors a year. And I think that's going to be increasing, between the two museums. Right, you've got ticketing. Even though we don't charge for admission, we've got ticketing and parking and retail and purchasing and just sort of like interaction with our global web resources. On the Research Institute side, we actually have a whole scholarship and library program. So we've got like another 1.5 million sort of like archive pieces in physical form. We're building a digital collection out, and then we've got scholars who visit from around the world, digitally and physically, to interact with those pieces. We've got the Conservation Institute, which actually does really interesting leading edge research on material science, because you have to think about the things like preserving plastics. Like, what happens when you've got a piece of art that's made of plastic in the 90s and now it's literally degrading, melting, or shredding? The conservation of like paints and oils and statues and stone, and then the tools and tooling to be able to assess that. So we've got some really interesting labs to do digital imaging and things like that. And then the foundation itself, as I talked about. One of the things I think that's really interesting is that out of this, we run a couple of programs that are available out to the sector as well, too, as a leading arts and cultural heritage organization. So we deliver open source software. So there's like a program called Arches, which is actually a data management for heritage organizations. So I'm not the one to talk about these next three areas, but these are things like into Arches, it's like being able to manage archaeological dig sites, and other sort of data management pieces for heritage organizations. We've got a vocabulary data system and data scheme. So this is like, you wouldn't think it's complicated, but it's actually really important. And this is, how do you talk about art? How do you describe it? How do you talk about characteristics? And then there's a provenance database as well, too, both the data scheme and the database. So you probably understand provenance in like the identity and cybersecurity context. So imagine the same thing. This is the ownership, the stewardship, the life cycle, the traveling around of pieces of art. And all of these are publicly accessible, they're API enabled, and they're data-rich systems. So at the end of the day, when I think about being a CISO for Getty, it's not just sort of protecting a museum environment, which again, I think is what comes top to mind, but it's actually really protecting infrastructure that supports the global cultural heritage organizations. And it's in a sector that honestly hasn't had the kind of investment and focus that it needs. Right. In the past, I think it was really hard to make the cases in some of these areas.
Yeah.
When we've had recent attacks on libraries and museums, right, the Seattle Library, the Toronto Library, and obviously sort of top of that list is the British Museum. So we've got a really rich landscape of digital technologies.
Yeah, no, sounds like you've got a lot going on, and I think you made a good case for why Getty needs a CISO. I think it's well done. It's really interesting because you wouldn't typically think things like libraries and museums. When you think cyber attacks, you think, oh, financial institutions, government agencies, big corporations, hospitals, even, which is just on,
Yeah.
the lack of morality there. It's like, is there no honor among thieves anymore? Right? Apparently not. There may never have been, but I think it's really interesting because it helps highlight the fact that I think there is no safe. Everybody is a target. Nobody is safe or off limits. Nobody is immune, and it's everybody now. No matter what kind of good you're doing, no matter how small you are, everybody's a target because either you're big enough to attract the attention of people directly, or in purely automated attacks, you're a small organization, you're going to get hit just because it's out there and it's an automated process, found the vulnerability, and now it's being exploited. And especially now with agentic, attacks, now you've got machine speed attacks, and you're a small organization. Even if you're a big organization,
Yeah.
it's tough for humans to fight at machine speed because, well, we're human and we don't do that so good, right? So I think that's really interesting, and I'm kind of curious. What's your stance on that? Where does this put you? I know you're 2 months into it, but this has to be something likely that's top of mind for you.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, first, I fundamentally think of the attack portion of cybersecurity almost exclusively from an economics and business standpoint, right?
Right.
I don't need to make the case to you or to the listeners that there is big business behind the cybersecurity attack lifecycle, right? You've got a whole supply chain. You've got like basically companies with HR departments now running these environments, and I doubt their KPIs are like how many hospitals did we not hit, right? And I think especially with that supply chain, right, the motivation really becomes like when you look at sort of like footprinters and sort of first hold attackers, right? They're just going to get whatever they can get, and it starts to enter the pool. And at some point, the economics just say, "Well, I've squeezed every other stone. Let's move to the next one." If they're even being thoughtful, but that's one of the things with the sort of the speed that we're talking about in the agentic and AI world is I don't think it matters, right? Like at this point in time, it's just, do you have vulnerabilities? Can they be exploited? And the answer is yes and yes, right? It's just going to happen. And for us, it's much more about understanding what the impact is going to be. And you're right, like our confidentiality concerns are relatively low. We have about 1,400 employees at any given time, and then a host of volunteers and community. Yeah, it getting bigger than you think. And so especially for the kind of organization it is. So we've got real concerns. We have to protect the privacy of that information. We have to protect and steward the resources we have, but we also have a whole community around it, right? We have all of these visitors that are visiting us. So even just for the landscape of I don't know the exact web numbers, but it's millions of web visitors a year, right? So even something as simple as being deployed as an attack vector, and that's not something that we want to be involved in, even if it doesn't do us direct harm. Reputational harm is really important to us, but it may not be ransomware. But if we are delivering malware out of our website, to me, that's just as big of a problem as if our core HR system went down at the end of the day. And so I'm very concerned about making sure that our posture is consistent across the board, because in the AI world, there are no safe corners, there are no safe spaces. And that's also why I think it's really important that I've worked most of my career in the public sector and the nonprofit sector. And so I also strive and look for areas where we can work together, because I don't think anybody can do it alone, especially organizations like ours.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think one of the things that I get really excited about is you look at products like Darktrace, for instance, where you've got AI being used in exactly the way you want it to be, not just bolting some LLM onto some security product and being like, "Hey, we're AI powered. Now give us money."
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, I get it. That's what everybody's doing these days. But I love that it you see. I think you get to see the kind of the future and where we're going with things from products like that, where you've got machine learning that's been around forever, and it wasn't sexy until just a couple years ago. And it's still machine learning. I don't think is the sexy side of AI, but I think it's the the unsung hero because as we get, I think the cool part is as now we're getting these agentic attacks going. How do you have any sort of legacy product that's looking and saying like, oh no, they're finding gaps in vulnerabilities that we've had for decades now, right? AI is finding those. It's a real problem. So you have to be able to say, you know what, this is normal, and suddenly that's abnormal behavior. This is an anomaly. Let me stop that and call for an adult and see what happens. See if this is truly the case. And I think that's the only way forward is as we have AI finding these vulnerabilities in browsers, in equipment, in hardware, you name it. There's all kinds of issues at play here. And I don't think you can patch your way into safety anymore. I think 10 years ago, yeah, patch management really important. Today, patch management is it's like the encyclopedia, right? It's like, oh, by the time it's printed, it's out of date, right? And
yeah.
so it doesn't make sense anymore. Yeah, you got to do it. You got to keep up with it just for, general hygiene. But in the future, now and in the future, you need something that can see beyond the patch management and say, hey, look, this is changing. So I get really excited about that, and I think we're going to see more and more products like Darktrace out there that are securing the network, your email, your endpoints. I don't know of any other way of doing it. It's like look into the future, and I think, how do we do this? Instead of the scary AI is going to take our jobs, it's more like the bad guys are using AI, and this is an arms race. But how do we use AI in a way that protects us without crippling us, right? Our historically, security was, ratchet it down, let people less access. That's not an option. We have to be fast and agile and enabling people to do their job to keep the organization functional. And yet at the same time, now we have to also secure against bad guys that have got, like T2 Terminators coming at us. All right, how do you do that? And I think that's the way, but curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get much of a different answer from me on that, but I'll color in the lines a little bit. I think so first, when I think about like preventative and protection controls, I'm with you. There's basic hygiene. We have an obligation, both legally, ethically, and I think just practically. Most people in the cybersecurity field are doing this not because they're excited about sort of like policy and compliance. They're doing it because they really care about sort of the either the mission they have or just doing a good job in this space. And so, I think it's important that there are the protection and prevention pieces in place. But I also think the sector has been like the discipline of cybersecurity professionals has actually been signaling for quite some time that this is the case. It's just been very hard to back it up through either business processes and business ownership. And frankly, I think the technology also wasn't there for a long time. But if you look, it's sort of a dumb example, but if you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, like it already says that, right? If you take it in its sort of purest form, we could drop governance right now in 2.0, but it's identify, what you have, protect, do your best to prevent the bad things from happening. But the three of the five steps are response, right? Respond, detect, like find something when it's gone wrong, respond fast enough for it not to be a problem, and then recover, get back to business, right? We've already signaled, I think, in a lot of our thinking, and even in some of the DevSecOps thinking with CI/CD pipelines, some of those pieces that there are much more rapid ways to respond. And I'm with you because especially in the sectors I've been in, so I've been the CISO now for three public research universities, and now at the Getty. And what I can tell you, all of these have a component of openness, right? So I I don't actually think that some of the differences between the business world and like something like higher ed or the nonprofits are as big of a gap as people think, because you can put controls in place, but at the end of the day, the business has to, like, business has openness needs. Salespeople, field salespeople need to be able to get access to data and move around and talk to people parts of the organization. Ideally, you should have, sales and program and product and engineering, like everybody talking to each other. Like that's all free flowing information in the same way. You might put some different boundaries on who can access it, but I think it's ultimately the same, that like cybersecurity has to be an enabler, and I've gone through the school of hard knocks. I've made every mistake our discipline has made in this. And I think what you said is really right, that one of the ways that we address this, so both philosophically, like I've been talking about, and practically, like you were talking about, is it's got to be in the response capabilities, right? Like I think that we'll never design perfect systems. And one of the other things, another wrinkle that I think is really exciting, but it's a wrinkle on this, is that the AI age is also the age of builders, right? So we're also no longer going to be building infrastructure where we can put a lot of thoughtful design and controls into it. We're going to build platforms for people to build really interesting things that we could have never thought how they should work, or when they should work, or where they should work, or why they should work, and somehow protect them. And we're not going to do that through a lot of complicated prevention controls. We're going to do that through observability pipelines, really building good trace data that not only informs the functionality of those systems, right? And I think that's sort of the virtuous loop here with security that we can start to build through specifically the observability pipelines, right? Or the data and observability pipelines, right?
Yeah.
So the more, like, one of the things that really excites me about some of the AI pieces, both in this sort of attack defense scenario you were talking about, and in sort of the business enablement side, is we're going to get better data inventories than we ever have in the past, because people will see the outcome value in this AI building age, and we'll be able to get better log and trace data, either getting it built in from the front when things are getting developed, or being able to collect it properly and route it properly, because people will want that for feedback on if their systems are working. So there's a tension here that you're talking about that I really believe in, and I think there's an opportunity, especially to like meaningfully and practically connect it more to the business, rather than just being able to say, well, with MFA you can now work remotely, right?
Yeah. No, totally agree. And I think the future is really exciting when it comes to enabling, even kind of the non-tech people to build and create things that they need in order to perform their function, whatever that may be. And I think it's interesting because you brought up the point of how, higher education and nonprofits not so different than a, commercial organization. I totally agree. An organization's an organization. People have functions they need to accomplish. Doesn't matter whether the goal is to make money or not, right? The at its core, it's still, an organization with certain functions. And at the heart of all of that is IT now. And that has to be secure, and it has to be kind of a force multiplier now. And I think AI is we're in this really exciting time where I think AI is going to help those who actually engage with it and want to use it to, be really so much more like capable and productive and enjoy their jobs more. And I think that's the big one. I think right now you look at any job. I don't care if you love coding or what your job might be when you're sitting there pecking at the keyboard, with the genius AI at your side to like, hey, what do you say? Let's do. It becomes so much more enjoyable. I get it. I have a daughter who she's just about to graduate, and she graduates next year as a computer science major. And it's funny because you'd think she'd be all about AI, but she's into cybersecurity, and she's like, I don't, I code better than this, and she's really enjoying the coding. And it's fun to try to get her to be open to AI, which I didn't think this would be a fight I'd have to fight, not with
Right.
her. And it's just so funny that there are people, I think at all levels, who are either, kind of for it and against it. And I think it's really interesting. I don't think there's any putting the genie back in the bottle, But we're certainly living in an exciting time where there's just so much potential, and kind of going off what you said, where it could go. I think that's where it's really exciting for everybody.
Yeah, I there's so much I want to say to that, but I fundamentally agree with you, right? Like I think that there is, if we aren't, if we're not careful, there is a real risk of job loss, and there's certainly going to be job changes, right? This is going to be a tumultuous time, and I don't want to downplay that fact, but I don't think it has to be sort of doom and gloom, and so the skills needed to understand what good code is, and the skills needed to understand the architecture and engineering behind it, I think are going to remain invaluable. Like the problem solving is going to be there in that case. At the Getty, what's really interesting is two things I want to share with you and the audience. So one is I actually have AI strategy for the Getty. So they've assigned me not cybersecurity AI strategy, but AI, like building the strategic framework and getting people on board with the direction where we need to go organizational wide. And I think because at the Getty and organizations like it, there is less motivation to move quickly on AI. So we have the luxury to sort of sit back and look at what's happening a little bit. And as you might imagine, the internal debates on these things are thoughtful and emotional. And I think that's right? Like we get to see the full spectrum of people, and we get to have the debates, not just get mandates, out of a governance group. And so I find that really interesting. That's the second thing, right? It's like I have AI strategy, and we're taking it very thoughtfully and curating conversations. So we're picking areas where we can actually, like develop and design business value. Cybersecurity, defensive posture is definitely one of them, where we can say, this is going to assist the people working in this. It's going to provide us value, and it's not going to challenge sort of our core values as we see them. And so we're picking those areas, we're working through them, we're doing pilots, and then we're also having conversations along the way, which is some of the things I think that in the sectors that I've worked in, some people may roll their eyes at like, let's have a conversation about this, but I think it is valuable to get smart people together to talk about the challenging ideas so that when people raise concerns, we can work through it. Because I actually think not tackling the hard questions or ignoring the hard questions will actually lead to more of the problems. Because if we don't thoughtfully and responsibly design these systems, and even if we keep the domain in this conversation to the cybersecurity pieces, right? Like, and I'm sure you've talked about this before, we have to find a way for folks like your daughter or the other folks, coming through. We need people to build those skills up. But like I'll give you a sort of generic example. If we can apply AI tools and services and support agents into tier one help desks, those folks are actually really good candidates to be SOC analysts, right? And this actually frees up an organization like Getty where mobility can be a little bit harder.
Yep.
And I think about this in a lot of sort of, I think this is one of the things that does differentiate universities, higher ed, nonprofits, is mobility is much harder, especially within an organization. Like we've just created career paths for people, right? I find it really hard to get SOC analysts. I think we've all faced that challenge. SOC analysts find it hard to get jobs, right? I think my position, students, I work with students for a lot of my career, and they have always hated my answer, which is they say, well, what can I do to get into cybersecurity? And I say, literally anything else. go learn a business process, go learn technology, figure out why it works, figure out where it doesn't work, figure out how it breaks, figure out how controls piss you off, and then come do cybersecurity. Because the cybersecurity skills can be taught, but the business knowledge, the architecture knowledge, the engineering knowledge, that's something you have to go learn. But now what we can do is we can start to get people who are in positions where they felt kind of stuck with rote tasks, give them tools to make that easier, and then provide them learning paths to help us. And actually, this is one of the ways in which I think, right, like, another truism in cybersecurity is that like it's team effort, security is everybody's responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I actually see, being able to like strategically and thoughtfully implement AI solutions to eat up some of the routine rote tasks
Yeah.
or the things where you really need sort of a different level of thinking on it, will free people up to do different and more interesting career things. And I think it will actually help us address the cybersecurity talent problem.
I couldn't agree more. You look at products like, Sentinel One and CrowdStrike, where they've integrated AI into their kind of their AI SOC now, and even on the EDR side, where you now have AI powered for, hey, this event happened, and then AI spits out very quickly what that means, how that happens, breaks it down into terms where if you were taking somebody who was on the help desk and you're moving them in and kind of training them up, getting their feet wet on the SOC, it becomes so much more manageable, so much easier for them to, oh, I get it. It's explained right there in layman's terms. Oh, and if you need more information, just ask it. Be like, what do you mean by this? Great, fantastic. And you combine that with LLMs like Claude, drop it in there, get and kind of go to town. You've got a great instructor who will be patient, will explain everything you need, and in it so fast, right? So I
Yeah.
think the tools are there, and I like your idea, right? Of especially in those organizations that where there isn't a lot of mobility. I think it really helps, and I think honestly, even in those organizations where there is a lot of mobility, to be able to, I love that you kind of tell people to be more diverse in their background, because I think that diversity, if there is such a thing as a good consultant, their value is, from their diverse perspective and experience, to be able to bring it in and say, hey, in this organization, in this industry, in this, these cases, they just to see it from another perspective, be like, oh, that, what, that worked in, over in the, I don't know, the janitorial industry. It works really well in the food service industry. Of course, right? Why not? But you just, we tend to get so stuck in our ways of whether it's help desk, whatever it is, engineering, accounting. So I love that. And I think that's, smart advice for anybody to, bring that diversity. And honestly, when it comes to the business side, right, you look at that, as a CISO and CIOs, the real value is to be able to understand the business. And if you can get the people coming up under you to look at it from, hey, look, we're here to enable the business. Let's understand the business that we're empowering and protecting. Then you really are growing the future, IT and cyber leaders, and not just the next kind of SOC analyst, I think.
Yeah, I think so too, right? Another way of saying that, the way that I think about it, is just like learning to ask good questions,
Yeah.
right? That's part of it, right? Because if you understand that you're trying to connect ultimately to an organizational mission, there are success indicators, whether they are explicit or implicit. Not every organization is good about
Mhm.
talking about what its success looks like, and that everybody in the organization, and also aside sort of the insider threat, like there's exceptions to every rule, but the people working are there because they want to do a good job. And everybody, like especially when they are working around security controls, or they're implementing, like in security, right? I think part of the school of hard knocks was being overly risk focused, right? Being hyper focused on saying, oh my god, this thing could go wrong, let me put a firewall in place, or let me put something in place to stop that, right? Well intentioned, but focused on the wrong problem, right? People, I think one of the things that organizational silos challenge us on is we start to think of that as the silo definition as our measure of success. And so I think the leadership opportunity is to help people understand, to think as business leaders, to ask good questions. And I also think that's also, the AI is just going to do what we want it to do. And the leadership, another portion of leadership, I think, is challenging our staffs and challenging our colleagues, and giving them the right kind of framework to ask the right questions of the tools, right? Because the challenge in what you said is that all of these things can also do the thinking for you. And at some point, you stop asking good questions and you start asking, just do this thing, do
Yeah.
this thing, right? That to me is it's a scenario that's it either results in mediocrity or tragedy,
Yeah.
right? And to me, both of those are unacceptable. And so I do think that we have a leadership obligation, and leaders in organizations to give staff the right problems with these tools, right? I think one of the shifting landscapes is not, do we use AI? It's, how do we use AI? I know that's somewhat simplistic and obvious, but I mean it specifically in this context, which is what are the new ways that we set success measurements for staff so that when they use the tools, they're remaining they continue to bring the thing that they can best bring, which is their critical thinking and their experiences, as you noted.
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting kind of lessons learned was when, I don't know if you've heard about this, but when Microsoft implemented Copilot, a few months in, they did an analysis to see how are we doing. And they expected about 85% of the organization to be power users of AI. And they found that it was the exact opposite. About 15% were power users. The other 85 had stopped using it. And so when they dove in and they looked at why, and they had interviews with people, they found that the 15% were people who were basically using their human skills, their leadership skills, and they saw the AI as, hey, look, this is basically an intern, a new employee.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know squat about what we're doing. I'm going to train them up, so I'll be very very clear as to what my expectations are, what the task is, and eventually they'll be really good at it. And lo and behold, that's what happened. The other 85% went straight to the, hey, write this email for me. And it's like, spits out the email like, ugh, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
Move and let me do it. And so they became, frustrated very quickly because they expected it to be at their level and understand everything. So I think one of the kind of the takeaway there is that that the future is still going to be heavily dependent on people skills, those soft skills, the leadership skills, even treating AI like a human, though it's going to be really important. I think we're out of that tech for tech phase where you just get to be a geek, speak geek, and be geek. And no, we don't get to do that anymore. Like that was
Yeah.
a short period of time where it was all about, being an Uber geek, and you could be in a dark closet coding away, and that was your world. But that world is gone now. And now it's back to people skills are what are going to drive us forward, even as it comes to using AI, which I think is great. And I think we saw even in kids how technology, just for the sake of technology, kind of inhibited and stunted a lot of those soft skills. So when they got into, the iPad kids early on, and they were texting instead of talking, and they weren't outside playing with their friends, that had a negative impact on I think an entire generation of kids who were the guinea pigs who just happened to land at that period of time with technology. But now you see the kids coming up now, they're kind of they are pushing back against that. They want the human interactions. They're not diving into like, oh, I just want to text and be in my own little bubble. That's not it at all. So I think it's actually going to have a really positive effect on the human experience, because your work is going to be more enjoyable. It's going to be more productive. It's going to be easier. You're going to have rely on these human interactions, even when it's not with a human, which I think is actually good for humans.
Yeah, yeah. I love that view of the future. As a security professional, I have a bit of skepticism. I think we need to work for it, but I
Yeah.
agree that I think it's a possible future, and I think we need to do it in a much closer to home context, and to tie it to the conversation certainly that I've been sharing, the thoughts I've been sharing with you, right? Like I go back to, like, I look at a SOC analysts and I say, I don't want you, I don't want to measure your success on how many things you found. I want to measure your success on how you've improved our observability pipeline from what we've seen, right? And I think that's part of it too. Is I think that one is people sort of grapple with this technology and come to realize where it can be valuable, and we couple that with shifting the way that we're like as a CISO, right? It's easy to go, okay, how do I measure my program success, right? Like, well, how many things did I stop? How much did it cost me to stop those things,
Yep.
right? Did I hit the right ROI on that? And you need those conversations, right? That's functional, the way a business needs to function. But I don't think that's leadership. I think that's stewardship, right? That's financial stewardship and ownership of the program. And then I think the leadership is, how do we also cultivate the problems that we're giving to staff, and setting out in the success of what we're doing, to make sure that we ride that wave of optimism and we enable it, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's really well said. And I think those are the kind of questions and focuses that people need to have. Um, Isaac, this has been an absolute blast. I've enjoyed having you on. I think we could do this all day. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about Getty?
Sure. So Getty is at getty.edu. It's in Los Angeles. Again, two physical museums in Los Angeles. If you're going to visit, do it now. So the Getty Center, at least if you're going to visit, the Getty Center is going to close for a year next year in preparation for the Olympics and to do some much needed maintenance. There's a 30-year-old tram that needs to be upgraded and things like that. Although if you're going to visit LA in sometime during that time, it is the year of the Villa, which is the Pacific Palisades version. So go check that out, see what we do, come visit. It's a great time, well worth wherever you're coming from around the world. And for myself, mostly on LinkedIn right now. It's where I do most of my communication conversation. And hit me up if you have any questions or you want to have a conversation.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for coming on, Isaac. And until next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.